Hello, my name is Jason Renault and welcome to another quick tutorial on how to use the lighting inside of Maya 2017 using the Arnold renderer. We're going to begin by lighting up this little scene here and discussing the different topics of how lighting works inside of Maya. The first thing to remember is that the lighting that you're going to see in your viewport is going to be very different than the one that you're going to see in the final render. To see what it's going to look like, make sure that you go to Arnold Render View. When you open it up, you're going to then see exactly what the final render is going to look like. So let's test it out. I'm going to go to Rendering tab, and I'm going to input the Directional Light. And as you can see, as I move the rotation of the Directional Light, I can see updated live. Now, if I try to scale it up or move it, it will not affect the lighting in my scene. Only the rotation information is going to be retained and used to light up my scene. So Arnold uses a different algorithm than what Maya used to use, which was mantle ray. And so some of the lights up here will not function as they would using mantle ray. So let's explore another light here. This one will not work, which is the ambient light. This is the directional light that we already have in our scene. This is the point light, which will be a small, bright 360 sphere. But as you can see, the drop-off is very small. So as soon as I move away from the floor, it no longer appears in my scene. Right. The next one is the spotlight. This one, again, you can use the scale, which will not affect the light. The rotation and transform will, though. If I turn on the light in my viewport, we're going to be able to see that there is a light here. If you want, you can even turn on shadows to see the lighting information. But it will be very different than what you're going to see in your final render. As you can see here, you can't even see the spotlight. So in order to see your spotlight inside of the Arnold render view, make sure you boost the intensity up. So see if I bring it up to 10, we're starting to see it. It is overblasted in my viewport, but it's barely showing in the Arnold render view. So what you might want to do is boost it up to at least 100. And now it's starting to make a little bit of sense. So I'm just going to quickly move it and place it into this little wall light here. Something that's important to remember about the spotlight. The source of the light information comes from the tip of the cone up here, which means if I hide it, if I hide the that dot, I will not be getting any light. So if I bring it up, see, it is behind the cone, and so I'm not getting any light anymore in my scene. If I move it a little bit forward, I'm getting my cone back. All right, so I'm going to place it up here, and now we're getting this little light. The information that you can adjust for this light, you'll find under the attributes editor. You can access this by clicking this icon up here, or pressing Ctrl A to alternate between the attribute editor and the channel box editor. The various attributes that you'll start with the lights are going to be the cone angle, which will adjust the size of it. And then the penumbra angle. The penumbra angle will be the softness of that light. Right, so we can see the exterior here is going to be much softer as I play with the penumbra angle. The drop-off will just amplify this. Now, the other thing that you're going to notice in all of your lights is the shadow tab. So shadows aren't always going to be perfect black, so you can adjust the color here and have maybe a bluish tint to your shadows. Now, the other thing to consider when doing lights is the softness and hardness of your shadows. So right now it is a very hard shadow on the cube. And so if I adjust this slider over here, my apologies, the light radius, shadow rays, I'm not adjusting the right thing, my apologies. It's actually here under Arnold. We are going to be adjusting the radius. as I adjust the radius, it will create a softer shadow from this light. And this is just going to work with that light as I adjust it. If I want to do so with my directional light, which is casting this very hard light here, or hard shadow, I'm going to select this light. I'm going to go into Arnold, and I'm going to adjust the angle. And as I adjust the angle, the shadow will be softer in my final render. Right? You're also going to notice that in this Arnold live render view, it might be a little bit pixelated, but the final render you will do using the render view, which is this icon up here. And so this will disappear in the final render. Now, something else to consider. We've put a spotlight here, and we're using an intensity of 100, right? By default, it capped out at 10, but you can always go back into this one and type in the number that you want. So 100 seems pretty good here for this scene. But if we were trying to put it in this gigantic scene, 100 will not be enough. So the spotlight in Arnold will depend on the size of your scene. So let's put it in here. And as you can see, I'm not seeing any spotlight whatsoever. And so 100 is not going to be enough anymore. So I might have to put it to 1,000. I might even have to put it up to like 5,000 to start getting the same lighting that I had for 100 in a smaller scene. So in other words, the size of your scene will greatly impact or affect how the light will be created inside of Maya. Now, some other tricks for lights. So I'm actually going to create an emissive shader here. So I'm going to select this TV. I'm going to select just this face, right click, and I'm going to assign a new material. Inside of the new material, I'm going to go under Arnold, and I will select the AI standard. The reason for this is that when you open up your AI standard by default, you'll be able to scroll down, and inside of emission, you'll be able to scale it up. This will make this plane emissive. It'll give it that glow. As you can see here, we're not seeing anything in my render view. This will occur sometimes. So what you have to do is close it up, go back into Arnold render view, and now it's going to appear. So I'm going to blast it up. I'll give it a little blue tint. And what's really interesting is that not only is it much brighter than the environment due to the emissiveness, but it's also casting this blue light on the wall. Which will bring me to the next step. Considering the environment that we're in right now, the light coming from the TV should be a little brighter than that. So I'll even dim the room here so we can see it better. Right? Okay, so this TV would cast a little stronger light. So what I can do is I'm going to use the area light. Now there are two ways of accessing the area light. There's the one on your shelf, which is this one over here, and then there's the one under Arnold. So if you go Arnold Light, you'll be able to use this area light. And this area light actually has a couple more options, so I highly recommend that you use the Arnold Light area light. So let's create this one and bring it into place. So there we go. We have this light in here. Now we're not seeing much in the render. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color again, give it the same blue. And then I'm going to adjust the intensity as well as the exposure. And again, since this light is in a very big scene, you might want to adjust this beyond the cap here. So let's go to intensity and type in 100. And see? Now we're starting to get a little bit more of that illumination coming from that television. All right. So those are the basic lights that you can use using Arnold Render and the differences of what you're going to see. Now, once you're done, right, We can see here the final look. If we go into the render view and create a new render, we're going to see that it is very close to what our live renderer was giving us. It is just a cleaner version of it now with less pixels. The other thing that I forgot to mention here for this light is that this light, as I mentioned, had extra features that the one on your shelf doesn't have. So if you look inside the attribute editor of this light, you're going to see light shape. So if you go under there, you'll be able to change it to different shapes. So we're not seeing it being updated in the scene, but if we go to Arnold render view, we're going to see that it's creating a cylindrical light. If we go under cylinder, then change it to disk, we're going to see that it'll create a disk light. So depending on your requirements, the area light can be very useful. Okay, and last bit of information on lighting. So by default, every object is going to have its own settings for lighting. So if we look and create a new cube here and place it over here, there, and look at it under Arnold render view, I'm actually going to take this spotlight here, bring it a little forward, a little bit more angle, just so I can see the shadow of the bigger cube here. Okay, so this shadow is casting, or sorry, this cube is casting a shadow on the floor. I'll actually create another quick smaller one. Okay. So this one here is casting a shadow and it's receiving a shadow from this other cube. If I go to the attribute editor of this cube, select the P cube shape here, and go into its render stats, I'll be able to adjust some of its settings. So I can remove cast shadows. So the big cube is no longer casting a shadow. I can turn it back on and off. And I can also remove receive shadows, which means now the tall one is not casting a shadow on this cube. Although this one is still technically casting a shadow, it's just no longer affecting this cube. If I wanted to, I could also keep cast shadows and then remove primary visibility. So the big cube is still casting a shadow as if it was there, but it's not going to appear in your scene. Okay, and finally, if you wish to add some transparency in your textures, in Arnold, it's actually a two-step process. So step one, assign the material, right? So this blend here, and you can adjust the transparency. Now, by default, when you used to do that in Maya using Mental Ray, that's all you had to do is adjust the transparency, and you'd see it live here, and in your render, you'd see that too. But now if you go to Arnold render view, we're not seeing any transparency on this cube. So Arnold requires you to do one extra step. You must select the object, and you can only do one object at a time, and then go below the render stats and go under Arnold. And inside of Arnold, you must click opaque. And now it will take into consideration the opacity. So now if I adjust the transparency, I can make it disappear. If you're using the AI standard actually has the transparency slider in a different area. So let's change it from blend to AI standard. And we're going to be able to find this under refractions, opacity. And this is how you're going to adjust the opacity of an object inside of the AI standard. And there you go. These are the basics of the lights. How to use them, how to find them, how it will be adjusted in your Arnold render scene. The best way to approach lighting would be to start with one light at a time adjusting it, start from softer and then bring it up instead of starting too strong. And then in certain areas that you feel is too dark, then bring in other smaller lights to fill in those little gaps. Since the lighting information in Maya is going to be different than what you would find in the real world. Since this is just the intro course, we're not going to be touching a lot of the global illumination aspect of rendering, and so we must fake it at this point. Okay, so if it was too dark in this corner, then I could place this little light and adjust the light setting, right? Might not be the best one for what I'm looking for, but it's just an example. So in the end, using the light inside of the viewport will become useless because then everything will be overblasted, so you can just turn that off, adjust your light as needed. But you might also need more than what lights are actually or would actually be there in a real environment. So for example, in this scene, there would just be like the television light on and perhaps this wall light turned on. But in order to actually get a more accurate feel, you might have to add spotlights in different areas or a directional light to make the entire room a little lighter. Since see if I deleted it, it would have been very, very dark, right? So adding this is going to help as well. But at this point, perhaps this light, I would not want to be casting a shadow since I'm just using it as a light to remove the darkness in my image or the really dark shadows. So what I would do is selecting this light, very similar to selecting the object. Instead of adjusting the shadow color, I would remove it from casting shadows. And again, since we're using Arnold, we're going to find it under the Arnold tab. And down here on the right, we're going to remove cast shadows. So at least now all it is it's just adjusting the lighting in my scene. All right. I hope this was helpful. Please contact me if you have any questions, and good luck.